scruffy hospitality. That's the type of hospitality that just says, real people live here. We actually have dishes in the sink and we have laundry on the couch. I'm not a spotted unicorn. I'm not a mythical creature. I have, I wear underpants that have to be washed and folded and put away. So
scruffy hospitality. I don't think I've ever heard a term that I love and deeply connect with. That is like anytime you come over to our house, there is 20 dishes in the sink because we live here and we cook here. Yeah. That is I love that. You are listening to the Daily Momtra Podcast, and I am your host, Jessie Truelove, better known as Move with Truelove on Instagram. In this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with Jamie Erickson, author of Holy Hygge. Jamie is a mother of 5, school teacher turned homeschooler, author, public speaker, blogger, and podcaster. She literally does it all. We chat about the concept hygge, a Danish lifestyle concept that speaks to coziness, togetherness, hospitality, and more. Hygge is something that I became aware about through a parenting book that I read and loved. The term reminded me deeply of a Dutch term that my own mama uses in our home. It's called heh-SELL-ick. Whether you know of hygge or heh-SELL-ick, these are concepts and words that don't quite translate to the English language, which is probably half of our American problem. We could all use a little more hygge in our life. Luckily, we have Jamie to break it all down. With that said, let's dive into the show. Okay, you guys, I am so stoked to have Jamie here to talk about hygge. Am I saying that right?
You are. Well done. It's not an easy word.
Hygge, which I first learned about through a parenting book that I had come upon, and it actually really resonated with me with some of my Dutch background from my mom's side. But I'm really excited to have the hygge expert in a sense come on here and tell us a little bit about it and introduce herself. She has a book all about it. So Jamie, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit of your background, your education, and you've kind of shifted into all these different avenues in your professional career and in your mother career also. So just give us the whole backstory about who you are.
Well, I think the word expert is a bit generous, but you'll come to know that I am a student in progress on hygge. I am not Danish, but I am married to, for the last 20 years, a Danish and Norwegian man. I'm actually originally from Phoenix, Arizona, and grew up in the inner city, but I met my husband, my Danish husband, in college, and he brought me all the way to the near tundra of Minnesota, where, if you know anything about your geography, Minnesota is the Scandinavian Mecca of the United States. The state boasts the most Scandinavians than any other state in the country, including the Danish people. And I was a trained teacher in the classroom for many years. And my husband and I started having kids. In fact, for a while, it was like raining babies in our house. They were just coming from everywhere. We now have 5 kids. And when my when my oldest was born, I decided it was time to hang up my teacher hat for at least for a time, and became a stay-at-home mom for a bit, and then decided to homeschool them. My husband had been homeschooled back in the 80s and 90s when it was like super weird and who even does that?
Right.
And I never, ever thought I would ever homeschool. I mean, who does that?
Yeah.
But
who does that with 5 kids? That's that's the burning question I have.
Yes, that is almost like educational suicide, I've heard it called, and many other things. But I did decide to stay at home and homeschool them, and I've been doing it ever since. And we graduated our first about 2 years ago. We have 2 still in high school, 1 in middle school, and 1 little baby caboose still in elementary school. So that's what I'm doing, and that's what I'm about. I'm also, a writer. I speak nationally at conferences, and just launched a book all about hygge, and that's what I'm here to talk about.
That is incredible. So I love a big family. I'm the oldest of 6.
Okay.
And my mom is like a saint, and I think moms of 5, 6, 7 kids, they have to be, because I just don't know how it's even possible. I have 2 kids, and I'm like, I don't remember my mom ever losing it, literally ever. She just did it. And the fact that you have 5 kids, you're homeschooling all of them, you're like a superwoman.
No, that is the misconception. I think here's the thing about lots of kids. Once you have past 2, you're sort of outnumbered anyway. Yeah. So you just keep adding, and they just, come into the fray. I highly recommend having a big family. I know it's not for everybody, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, totally. I loved growing up the oldest, and I loved having so many brothers and sisters. And now it's I couldn't imagine it any other way as well. So that resonates with me a lot. Okay, so let's dive into hygge. I can't believe I'm saying that right.
Yeah.
Hygge. It feels like hygge is like this very trendy new concept that everybody is kind of like bandwagoning on. I was like doing searches on social media, and it kind of looks like an interior design style,
Sure.
and more of like cozy blankets and a warm cup of coffee. The first time I ever learned about it was actually through a book that was about parenting, and it was the Danish way of parenting, where I know you talk about this too, that the Danish culture is like ranked the most happy among is it all countries in like the world?
Just the European Index of Happiness.
Okay,
so,
yeah, like
I would argue it's probably pretty high on the worldwide index as well, but we don't really have, that's not a thing that I know of.
Okay, yeah. So that's what this other book was saying as well, and trying to figure out like what are the concepts that make these happy people, and hygge in that book was a big part of that. And I know it's a big part of what you are teaching and spreading. So can you tell us a little bit about hygge and what it means to live a hygge, to have hygge, to be hygge? Tell me about it.
Yeah, so hygge is a word that we don't really have an English translation for. There's no direct English equivalent for it. So for me to give you sort of the Cliff Notes version of what it is, you can think of it this way. It's a lifestyle concept that engenders feelings of coziness and comfort and contentment, things like that. In my book, I focus on 7 of the major tenets of hygge, but you can't really encapsulate this big lifestyle in 7 points, 7 PowerPoint presentation things. So the Danish people have kind of cocooned themselves in this lifestyle for hundreds of years. If you know your Danish history, it sort of came about because of some war and their reaction or how they cocooned themselves after having been through war. But that was hundreds of years ago. And slowly but surely, it's trickled across, country lines and has landed in the United States. It came over here about 5 or 6 years ago, at least the word that we know of. Mm-hmm. But actually, if you're a Dane and you're living here in America, even if you didn't really know the word or know exactly what it meant, chances are you have experienced these 7 lifestyle tenets just from, day one of your life. And you have been sort of wrapped in this emotional blanket of hygge and have been walking it out without maybe even realizing it. Mm-hmm. There is something about the Danish people that when you meet them, there's this abiding constant in their life. That's the best way I can describe it. They just have this contentment and this peace. And if you think about where the Danes live in Northern Europe, where they are swathed in, biting temperatures and dark days, and any one of us would go there and think, how do you even survive this? I need some medical attention for my emotions. Right. And this was really their reaction to sort of bolster themselves to not just survive those really harsh environment, but actually thrive in it. And so obviously fall and winter is high hygge season, and we're stepping into that now. And it's their way of sort of, for lack of a better way to say it, bolstering their emotions so that they can really find some contentment, even when, the rest of the world is crumbling around them. And mm-hmm. It really has become a trending topic. It's been hashtagged on Instagram more than 8 million times. As we do in America, we've started to commercialize it. There's a hygge game. There's, hygge socks. There's whole stores of hygge, but as we make it popular, with popularity comes a little bit of a cheapening and a lessening. And a lot of people who have kind of grasped onto it in America think that it can be just like packaged and shrink wrapped. And, mm-hmm. Here you can have this box of hygge for easy carry out, but it is a lifestyle. It's an inward reaction to outward circumstances.
And that's what I want you to like tell us. What are the 7 tenets?
Sure.
And do we have to go hygge shopping, or can we do hygge at home? Like just and embody really what this, for lack of a better word, is, the coziness. And I think it's like also bringing that coziness from spring and summer and carrying that coziness on into the other seasons where everybody's like, thriving in spring and summer and going outside and having fun. And it's like, that doesn't have to stop when it gets cold outside or when it's raining or, right. I really love that about the Danish culture that I've read, is that, there, you can't just stay indoors. There's
Right.
the whole world out there that you need to go still do and experience. And you don't have to be so down about it. There's ways, like you said, to bolster all of these better emotions and really thrive.
The Danish people really live present in the season that they're in.
That is
they're
hard.
not always yes, and they're not always reaching for the better life. They recognize that my life is pretty good right here, right now. They're fully present people. I would say that my husband, my Danish husband, is the most fully present person I've ever met. He is completely right where he is and enjoying himself, looking you in the face, looking you in the eye, which is very countercultural to our American way of living. We're always looking for the next thing. Yeah, absolutely. So that is one of the elements that I would say is paramount to a hygge lifestyle, is really living seasonally. And that doesn't necessarily mean just calendar seasons like spring, summer, winter, fall, but even life seasons, not always looking for the season that you're not in. Right now, I'm living with teenagers, and I could be looking ahead and thinking, oh, someday I'll have an empty nest. No, I need to be fully present. For the moms who are, living with little ones, and you think, I can't even go to the bathroom without having, people grabbing onto me. And it's finding ways to be content with right where you're at. So I want to go over those 7 tenets, because I think that will help us as we navigate this conversation, because you really cannot package hygge up. It really is it's an inward display that's showing out to the rest of the world. So the 7 tenets that I talk about in my book, again, these are not all the only parts of hygge, but I would argue that they're right up there at the top of a hygge lifestyle. And that's hospitality, relationships, well-being, and that's the care of oneself as well as the care of others, atmosphere, comfort, contentment, and rest. And obviously, because hygge does create really welcoming, inviting spaces, it's really easy to Instagram that, right? We can create the cozy scene with the wool socks and we're sitting by the fire with our cappuccino reading a book. And that's one piece of hygge. Atmosphere is one piece, but we also have to remember that atmosphere is less about things that you put in your spaces and more about a feeling that you create.
Absolutely. And we know Instagram is a highlight reel, and that's why it's like seeing this cute fireplace or coziness. It's like, is the rest of that environment cozy? Is how it smells cozy? Is that person cozy? Like are the conversations that are happening there cozy? It's so much deeper. And it, like you said, I just, not that I like the term, but I like the explanation of it almost cheapens what it is by putting a label that says it's hygge in, Target or like whatever. I want you to continue with the 7 tenets, but this whole concept of hygge felt not so foreign to me, because my mom is Dutch, and we have a word called heh-SELL-ick, which is Dutch for, a cozy situation, or it just feels good. Everybody there is calm and is enjoying their time in their space. And there isn't really Americans don't have the word that really translate that. And I think that is what's lacking of, making us one of the top happiest countries in the world, or whatever. And also we're
speed addicts. We struggle to be fully present. We struggle to even take a breath and exhale. It's not in us.
Right. A whole section of like what I do in my professional field is teaching people how to breathe, because we forget how to breathe. We hold our breath. And just, a lot of what I talk about is motherhood, and just like you said, like being present and seasonally. It doesn't have to be the calendar or the weather seasons, but being present in the season that you're in right now, even if it's hard, and figuring out ways to thrive in those seasons. It doesn't have to be something that you're wishing yourself out of, because 10 years from now, you might be looking back and wishing you were back in that season, for a moment, or
Well, even a hard season, one thing I talk about in the book, and I have lived myself in various iterations, I'm 43 years old. I've lived some miles, and I've seen enough hard things to know that even in hard things, we can really regret those. We can really try to wish them away, pray them away, do everything we can to pad our lives to stay away from hard things. But you have to have a winter in your life if you're ever going to have a spring. And the Danish people really understand that well, that winters are not necessarily just times of death. there is always growth happening just below the surface. And you have to have some dormancy in your life, those dark, bleak times, in order that life can really grow, in order that roots can grow deep. So there's a lot happening just below the surface, even in a dark time. So when we're talking about seasons, here's the reason why you can't just package up hygge. You can go out to Target, and actually Target has an entire hygge line on target.com.
Oh, does it? I would just said Target. Yes. That's funny.
Yeah. So you can go to target.com, go to their hygge line, and buy a beautiful, chenille blanket to envelop yourself with. And you'll feel cozy and comfortable for all of 2 seconds. But what happens when the cat gets a hold of that blanket? What happens?
It goes right out the window.
Right. You can decorate with all the candles, and candles are the Danish people burn more candles than any other people in the entire world. Candles are very paramount to hygge. Feelings of ambiance and atmosphere. They really do elevate just a basic moment when you light a candle. But what happens when the candle tips and the whole thing goes up in flames? So it's less about the aesthetics of a room, the aesthetics of your life. Those things help. And that's one thing that the Danish people recognize. The outer life will always affect your inner life. So that warm, cozy blanket definitely is going to give you feelings of coziness, but it can't stop there. And so that's where some of the other tenets of hygge, the comfort, the hospitality, the deep relationships, 3 out of 5 people in America claim to be lonely in their lives. And that was a pre-pandemic statistic, by the way. So I can just imagine how amplified that is now. But the cure for loneliness is not more relationships, actually. It's just deeper relationships. And that's what the Danish people understand. So they are often looked upon as kind of elitist. When you move to a community that is mostly Danish, it can feel very isolating at first, very shut off, like you are an outsider. And that's not their way of like holding people at bay. It's actually their way of bringing people in close. So they have very deep relationships, and it does take a while to sort of crack the Danish, into the Danish circles. But once you're in, you're in. And I think that we all could use a lesson in cultivating deep relationships, abiding relationships that actually mean something and matter.
Chiming in, let's talk rituals. More specific, ritual pre- and postnatal vitamins. I've been taking ritual vitamins for over 4 years. You guys know I have a code for you. It's TrueLove20 to save you 20% off to try them out for yourself. It was the only prenatal I could take on an empty stomach that didn't make me feel nauseous, and it's the postnatal I've been taking since delivering my youngest. Why I love Ritual is that they have traceable ingredients. They're all non-GMO, third-party tested, vegan, and nothing artificial. Their subscriptions are easy to start and easy to cancel, and their team of scientists and nutritional experts are on a mission to turn your new healthy habit into a ritual. The shipping is always free. You can control your delivery date, cancel anytime, and there's a money-back guarantee. I love Ritual. I know you guys will too. Now let's get back to the show.
Well-being, because that is something that, you hear a lot about self-care. It's important to fill your own cup in order to pour out. And I think that there's some truth in that, but I think oftentimes we take that to an extreme and we hold on to that as in like, that's my right. It's my right to care for myself. And I agree that you cannot fully care for others unless you fully care for yourself. But the other half of that, or the other side of that coin, is the care of others. And when we are expelling so much energy in, buying Egyptian cotton sheets, taking a spa day, and doing all these things that we associate with self-care, which are not necessarily bad, but when they are multiplied and amplified so large in our life, we have to ask ourselves, am I then also turning around and caring for someone else in an equal way? And so I do talk about that in the book, especially when we're living in a time, in this cultural moment where, there are a lot of fires to be fought in society, a lot of social injustice happening, a lot of people shouting from the curb. And it's really hard for one woman to say, well, how can I affect change? What can I do that will have a rippling effect to actually bring peace and healing, hygge, to the world? And so hopefully I've included some tools in helping a woman to assess her own life and determine, what are my banners to wave? What are the problems that I can help solve? I can't solve them all, but I should be able to solve something.
Right. Oh gosh, yeah. How overwhelming to see all of the things that are happening in the world, have to take care of yourself, have to take care of your children,
Right.
and do all the things that are expected of women and mothers and all these things. And just, I think there's so much to be said for choosing and picking a lane and really putting your eggs in those baskets versus carrying the weight of all these problems, figure out where you can actually make a difference. And I love that you have those tools in your book to really figure out to look inward, and then also, what can you actually do? And also, just on the note of self-care, this is something I talk about too, is that, self-care is really in the eye of the beholder. It doesn't have to be a spa day or a facial or all these things that, you know, look very luxurious and cost a lot of money that maybe not everybody has access to. It's, for me, that looks like taking a shower without my kids in there, for me, because it's, like you said, also, like, it's my right to be able to do this. Yeah, but I'm not trying to be a martyr, but my kids, they just want to be with me 24/7. So yeah, the easiest way to do all that all at once is all of us in the shower and doing it as fast as we can.
Right.
And it really is a self-care moment when I'm able to do that by myself. It doesn't have to be this big grandiose thing. And then that also kind of brings that shift down. Like, am I putting the same energy into other people? It lowers that. It's like, well, I can't buy everybody a facial. I can't buy everybody a spa day. But then it kind of evens the playing field a little bit too.
The other thing I would add to that, and it goes back to seasonal living. One of the very best pieces of hygge advice that I've ever received came from my mother-in-law. And I moved up here about 20 years ago. And she says, Jamie, what you need to do to not just survive, but really thrive in the winters. And I was so naive. I had no idea how cold it actually gets here. It's not uncommon to spend several weeks in negative 20-degree temperatures. That is cold. That is real cold. And I was not prepared for that. I lived the first 21 years of my life without even owning a coat. I didn't even know how to prepare for that. So she says, just for your own mental health, because seasonal affective disorder is a real thing and is especially common here in the northern states where it gets very cold and very dark. She says, Jamie, you need to pick a seasonal hobby just for yourself that you only allow yourself to do during those darkest of winter nights and winter days. And what you do when you do that, there's like a mental shift. You can step into that season with anticipation because now you're looking forward to doing something that you can only do. And then you carry that over to other seasons, because hygge isn't just a winter concept. It is a lifestyle. So you can hygge in the summer. You can hygge in Phoenix, Arizona, where I used to live. You can hygge in other places. So if you carry that thought over and say, like, here's what I do in the summer. Obviously, our summers here in Minnesota feel like 2 seconds long. That's it. That's all we get. But I love a good summer dress. And so I have a ridiculously large amount of summer dresses in my closet. You would peek in there and you would think, Jamie, you are a lunatic. You can't even wear all these in the time that we have summer here in Minnesota. But that's my hygge to myself. I packed my closet with some summer dresses that in my, 2-week span of summer that I get to wear them in Minnesota, I anticipate summer so much and step into it with so much joy that it really does help me be fully present in that season when I know I have something to look forward to. So that's just one little tip. If you're looking for a way to be fully present in your season, is afford yourself a small little hobby, a small little something. One winter, I packed away a bunch of books that I wanted to read from an author I had just discovered. I bought them at yard sales or thrift shops, kind of squirreled them away, and then only let myself start reading them in November when it started to get dark. And I was like looking forward to
the darkness.
Normally be considered the worst part of the year in Minnesota, because I had something to look forward to. So do you see how, like, the outward life always affects the inward life? And that's just one simple way.
Yeah, that is really genius. And that can really be applied to any season, like you said. And it's not like do this one thing. It's find what brings you joy and then apply that to your own life. So that's like everybody can pick their own thing. So I love that.
And you can even do that in life seasons, because I'll tell you this, now that I have teenagers, one thing that I really miss is, like, here we are in fall. None of my teenagers want to carve pumpkins. They're just not into it. But because I did it, and I did it so well when they were little, I can look back with gratitude and really fully appreciate that short season of having littles who were excited about simple life pleasures like carving pumpkins. So the mamas who have littles, don't begrudge this time. Look for ways to say, someday I'm really going to miss that.
Yeah.
I'm going to be fully present right here and do this thing with them because I know it won't last for very long.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. You're gonna make me bring a tear to my eye because you got the teenagers that don't want to carve the pumpkins. That's all in our future at some point.
Yep.
Okay, so after understanding a little bit more of what the hygge lifestyle means, how we can apply it to all of the seasons of our life and also weather seasons, how can we start to create more of this in our home? Is it adding in the candles, like as a family? Is it a specific day that we do this? Is it, I don't know, maybe some like takeaway tools for people like to how to start implementing this like into their home?
Well, I think number one at the top of the list is you need to start opening your doors more often. Hygge is a very inclusive lifestyle, and hospitality is, at the top of the list for a reason. And if you want to develop and cultivate deep relationships with people, if you want to care for their well-being and then extend opportunities for them to care for you well, if you want to feel the comfort that is yours for the taking, if you want to be fully content and find rest, it involves community. So find ways to, what I like to call, participate in scruffy hospitality. That's the type of hospitality that just says, real people live here. We actually have dishes in the sink and we have laundry on the couch. I'm not a spotted unicorn. I'm not a mythical creature. I have, I wear underpants that have to be washed and folded and put away. So you have to be willing to welcome a little bit of scruffy hospitality, show your real self to others. And you know what that does? That really does have a rippling effect. When you're willing to open up your real self and your real life with your real door open to others, you will give them the courage to do the same. And they're more apt to reciprocate and invite you over knowing, oh, she doesn't require perfection. So I don't have to be perfect. So number one, I think right at the top is we have to be willing to open our doors. And right now we came through a pandemic. So none of us really have great muscle memory for how to do that.
Right.
But we have to start somewhere. So do it in baby steps as best as you can. Start inviting people over. So that's number one.
Scruffy hospitality. I don't think I've ever heard a term that I love and deeply connect with. That is like, anytime you come over to our house, there is 20 dishes in the sink because we live here and we cook here. Yeah. That is like, I love that.
And what that does for people when they see your 20 dishes in the sink is, okay, I can take a breath because I too have 20 dishes in my sink.
Yeah.
She's a real person.
Yeah.
So you will dive into much deeper layers with a person if you're just willing to and that's not to say that you have to like have an absolute pigsty. We
have some boundaries.
Right. Like tidy up if you feel the need and, do a little bit of cleanup because nobody wants to come into like food all over the place and like dirty diapers sitting
Just
out.
don't be sterile. It doesn't have to be totally sterile.
You don't have to sterilize your life. Yep.
Yeah.
So hospitality. I think another way, especially for those of you with kids, is begin to train and help your kids learn basic communication skills. And what that looks like is one thing I do at the dinner table every night is ask my kids 2 or 3 open-ended questions. These are questions that cannot be answered with yes or no answers. It's training them in good communication skills because they have to think of an answer and give it. It's training them in waiting my turn in a conversation. It's training them on how to be a good listener because listen, we have so many public speaking classes in this world. What we really need is a couple of public listening classes. And you can do that right at your own table. So having some set aside time at the dinner table where you're actually asking some real open-ended questions, training your kids in doing the same. In fact, I have a jar of questions that sits by my table. And if I can't think of one or they can't think of one, we'll just pull a slip out. And you might think, well, that's very robotic. That doesn't sound very personal. But with the retelling of questions, it becomes habitual. And so then your kids will be more apt to be able to be the generation that can ask a good question and listen, not just hear someone, but really truly listen. And that takes training. It takes time. It takes investment. So for the moms, that's one simple way that you can start bringing some hygge into your home is to teach your kids to ask good questions and listen to the answers.
Right. I love that. I love that. That's such an easy way to start fostering those deeper connections is by asking good questions, because how much more meaningful are your connections with people when they really take time to listen to you, but also ask those meaningful questions and really have interest in what they're asking you versus like the surface level. Well, I don't really know. I don't know what to talk about, and just like you said, it takes training, it takes a lot of reps and practice to know and understand what a good question sounds like. So
Right.
that's such an
And
easy tool.
that it's natural sounding, because I'm an
Yeah.
awkward human. When you get me in a room, I do all the awkward things, but I'm a work in progress. I'm learning how to be less awkward. I'm training myself how to be a person who asks good questions. One of my most favorite questions that I love to hear people ask, and my daughter, my 18-year-old, actually is the one that taught me this one. She often starts a conversation with, "What question do you wish more people asked you?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That makes people really think. And then they come back with their answer, and then you tuck that away because you know
Mm-hmm.
to ask them that the next time you're with them.
Yeah.
And they'll be vulnerable enough to answer because you were vulnerable enough to ask. And you're not just sitting there reloading, thinking of your next thought, thinking of your rebuttal, or, loading your verbal guns to, give a snappy reply. You have to learn to really listen.
Jamie, are you giving us relationship advice right now? Because I feel like you're
I could
speaking to
be.
me on like not as a mom. I feel like this might be some wife talk.
I could be. It's all about a part of Hygge, just learning to be fully present. And like I said, I am such a work in progress at this. I feel like I'm being trained with one of the best. My husband is something else. He's quite a guy.
That's okay. Let's go. Let's shift the conversation a little bit towards homeschool. I was actually homeschooled for a few years.
Okay.
I did not like any second of it. And I think there were about 1,000 reasons why it didn't work. Fast forward to now, 29 years old, I do plan to homeschool my children
Okay.
for about 1,000 reasons. Do you have any tips for moms out there considering homeschooling their children, but they feel like maybe they don't know enough or they're not patient enough, or kind of feeling like it's more like I'm not qualified to do
Yeah.
this versus the curriculum? Because I think there's a lot of resources out there about that, but I feel like for the moms that feel like they're not good enough or they aren't patient or don't have the skills, what are some tips for them? Either I guess whether it'd be a good consideration for them to do, or are there any like hard rules for maybe it's not a good idea for you to do?
Okay. So I was a trained teacher. I'm a licensed teacher, and I can tell you that a lot of times the fear that a mom has when she's contemplating on whether or not she wants to homeschool is the fact that, oh, I don't have all the letters behind my name. I don't have that degree on my wall. But for those of us who did, become trained teachers, have that degree on their wall, we can all tell you that really and truly a teaching degree gives you some tools to control the masses.
Mm-hmm.
And there are certain tips and tricks when you're trying to teach a herd of children that you really
Right.
do need to know that are very helpful. But when you're just talking about strictly education and learning is just a continuous building of the mind. It's just learning the next thing. And so we often are conditioned to think that learning can only look one way because that was the way that we came through. And that's what we know. And that seems like it is that it counts. It
Yeah.
meets certain benchmarks. It has certain qualities to it and looks a certain way. It's very formal. But learning is just building the mind. So you, as the mom, have actually been learning and building your child's mind since the very first moment they took a breath. In fact, studies show us that 90% of the most important things a person will ever know and learn in their life happens before the age of 5.
Wow.
So
Cool.
you are the one who poured in to that 90%. So why talk yourself out of it and tell yourself that you can't do it when you've already done 90% of the work,
Right.
I think I'll say 3. The 3 greatest factors in homeschooling, or really just education in general, whether you're a teacher in the classroom or a mom at home, is 1, just a love for that child. And let me tell you, there's nobody in the world who loves your kid more than you. And that love will compel you forward and will stay with you and stay true for all the years that you choose to home educate them. And that will really lead the charge as you're teaching them. That love will compel you forward. So love, I think your curiosity will move the needle like nothing else. They have to see that you are still a learner, that learning is for a lifetime. Learning doesn't just stop by the time they are in 12th grade and they get that, blessed diploma. Yeah. Learning is for forever. And so you have to model that by being a very curious person, by being willing to be a beginner, by starting something new. They have to see you try something and fail and then get back up and try again. That's what learning is. And it really does start with you. You spark that curiosity in them for how curious you are. And then number 3 is just faithfulness. You can buy the very best perfect curriculum. By the way, there's no such thing, but let's say there was. Let's say there was a perfect curriculum. You can plunk down all kinds of real cash money and buy that expensive perfect box set of this or that. And it's not going to do a bit of good if you don't just stick to it faithfully every day. Just little bit by little bit showing up every single day. Mm-hmm. And on the flip side, you can have the worst curriculum. And everybody says, why are you even doing that? And you will see the needle move on their education with just little bit by little bit showing up in faithfulness. Mm-hmm. I think that mothers fear homeschooling because as mothers, we naturally carry a very large backpack of fears for our kids. We fear every part of their life. We're fearing that we're messing them up, that we're screwing them up. They're going to need therapy someday. But then you add that larger element of their education into that backpack, and all of a sudden, now our fears have grown exponentially. Yeah, so the fear of homeschooling gets added to all the other fears that we carry around as mothers, and then those fears get amplified. But if you just remember those 3 things, the love that you have for your child, the fact that learning is for a lifetime. And you know what? You might, as you're homeschooling, you might find that you miss out on something. Maybe you forget to teach some important something. I can tell you as a teacher that was in the classroom for years, the teachers are forgetting some important something too. It's just, rite of passage for humanity. And there will be gaps in your child's education. You can probably look back on your education and see that there are some sort of gaps in your education. But here's the thing about real learning. It's true what they say. Necessity is the mother of invention. When your children need it, they will learn it because they'll have to. So even if you miss out on one important thing and they don't learn, the names of all 50 states, when they need to know it, they'll learn it. So the love you have for your child, just your own personal curiosity and the fact that learning is for a lifetime, and then just daily faithfulness, plugging away at it.
Yeah, just chipping away. Yep. That's amazing. It really takes a lot of the pressure off because I feel like that's what, like you said, it's a great way to put it is that we have this backpack of all the fears for our children for their whole life, and then adding on the weight of having to teach them everything that they're learning in public school. But just knowing that, that they're not tapping into every single thing. The teachers in real schools or in public schools are real people too, are real humans too, that forget things or that maybe the curriculum doesn't touch on this one important thing or whatever it may be. But if they need to learn something, they will.
I've seen like all the different avenues of education. I was in the public school. I taught at a private school. I'm now homeschooling. And I can tell you that there is not one method of learning that doesn't have its own strengths and its own struggles. Yeah. So it's just a matter of which are the strengths and struggles that you think would be best for your kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, there's so many ways to learn. And I feel like public school just does a really good job at teaching one way, having all the standardized tests and all these things. And I feel like as adults, we all come out of traditional school and we're like, wish we would have learned this. I wish we would have learned how to do our taxes. I wish we would have learned how to build a business, all these things that, by homeschooling, you are potentially giving your children the opportunity to learn these things that you feel like would have been helpful for you to know as an adult or as an 18-year-old going into the real world, even though I feel like it's all the real world. But it's giving you not just more responsibility and this extra weight and these worries, but it's also presenting a really amazing opportunity to connect and build a deeper relationship with your child, and giving them tools and resources that you didn't have growing up. So it's all one big giant opportunity. And just like I always say, there's a million ways to be a good mom. There's probably a million ways to be a good teacher too. And they don't all have to look or feel the same.
Yep, because we all are gifted with unique gifts. We all have very unique kids. We have unique budgets, unique life circumstances, and I think that all of those things need to be taken into consideration when you're considering homeschooling or otherwise.
Yeah, totally. This show is not a religious show, but I know that your book is based in faith and also hygge. So can you explain a little bit about how these two interweave together and how you have chosen to interweave them into your life? Because I know that there probably are a lot of people that are going to resonate with having a faith and wondering if hygge can, mesh in with what their beliefs are. So just kind of walk us through that a little bit.
Well, hygge is not a faith-based concept. It is simply a lifestyle practice of the Danish people. But as an evangelical Christian, and I am, I began looking at the 7 tenets and just the lifestyle of hygge in light of my faith, as one does. You view the world through the lens that you see it through. And I noticed that there were many overlaps, that hygge and my faith in Jesus really did have a lot of similarities. And where hygge is what I would consider a lifestyle band-aid, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but it is a temporary earthly concept, just a lifestyle. I felt like when I partnered it or paired it with my faith, it felt like it put more gravity to what I was doing. And so I could view it through the lens of, I don't have to compartmentalize my life. Like, this is my faith life. This is my regular everyday Monday life, my Monday through Saturday. This is my Sunday life. I could have a one-piece life because they meshed well. Because all of the 7 tenets that I talk about in my book, you actually can see, or I can see, through the life of Christ.
What is your number one piece of advice you would give to your past self as a first-time mom?
Really easy. This too shall pass.
Yeah.
And you can take that in 2 different directions. Mama, who is experiencing the lovely wonder of little ones. Remember, this too is going to pass. So sit with it as best you can. And I know that when you're in the thick of it, in the toddler rodeo show, that is not easy. But also you can look at it on the other end, that when the days are really hard, when you are stuck in, trying to potty train a child that just is like, is this child going to still be in diapers when they're 18? Or when you're stuck in the, the terrible twos or whatever it is, remember, this too shall pass.
Yes, that definitely, it goes both ways, like you said, and it passes and it goes fast and it feels slow and, all the things. Okay. Currently in your season of motherhood or life, what is your Momtra to get you through hard times? It's like a mantra, but mom style.
I would say my current mantra goes right along with the hygge lifestyle, and that is that the outward life will always affect the inward life. I cannot control all of my circumstances, but I can control my perspective about them.
And Jamie, where can people find you? What resources do you have available right now? And I know you have a few books out as well. So why don't you give us the lowdown on what you are currently offering?
Yeah, so you can best find me at jamieerickson.com. I am the co-host of the Mom to Mom podcast with Kate Battistelli and September McCarthy. So you can get the latest episodes there, as well as, check out my books, Homeschool Bravely, which is my book about homeschooling, and then Holy Hygge. I also offer lots of homeschooling helps and tools on my blog, The Unlikely Homeschool.
Yeah, I did check out that blog. There is so many tools there and a lot of resources for any moms that are looking to homeschool. I get so many DMs about that because I'm very open in the fact that we want to homeschool our kids. And so we always get tons of questions about that. And honestly, I have no idea how to answer them. So I'm glad you're here to have the answers for people to go and check out your blog and get some resources on that. Jamie, do you have any final words or anything else that you want to leave us with?
I would just say, I'm assuming that the majority of people who listen to this show are probably women, probably moms. My biggest, best piece of advice, or my one ending thought is to just be fully present with your kids. It is, I know you hear this all the time from, ladies at the grocery store with the gray hair, and it goes by so very fast. I cannot believe I have a grown adult daughter. But these are the planting years. You are planting right now. You cannot expect a huge harvest right now, but the harvest will come, and it's so good.
Beautiful. Jamie, thank you so much for your time today and answering all of my questions about hygge and homeschooling and giving us your advice and tips. It was my pleasure speaking with you, and I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Same. It was delightful. Thank you so much for having me.